Timberwolves, Miss Robolino coming in with another virtual lesson for you about the early causes of the Civil War. So this unit that we have started, we are starting to take a look at Civil War in the United States and how it really affects Texas. But before we go ahead and we get into the effects of Texas, we're going to go ahead and view why the Civil War is going to happen and what events lead to that Civil War. So after this unit, we move on to the Civil War itself, along with the Reconstruction, what happens after the Civil War. So your assignment today is going to be viewing different documents and filling out the sheet that goes with it. And from there, I am also going to be going through each document, talking about it, and showing additional videos to help solidify the information. So just bear with me, follow along. Feel free to go through, skip parts if you need to, and just see what you need. But let's go ahead and let's begin. So the first document we're going to be viewing today is going to be focusing on the cotton gin. So what is the cotton gin? How did it come to be? And why was it created? So let's go ahead and let's just kind of set the scene with looking at the United States as a whole. So the United States whole really comes into the part when the United States gained its freedom. You have the northern states and the southern states. And at this time, because of the way that the southern states are and the climate and the geography, their main economic stability is based off of agriculture. Agriculture is anything that has to do with farming, ranching, anything with the land. The North, on the other hand, not really so much because of what's available with their resources and the climate not being very suitable for long growing seasons. So at this time, the South is focusing on one of a couple things: rice, indigo, tobacco, things that are actually very easy to harvest and also very wanted, a commodity that's wanted worldwide. So when you are going to be a plantation owner, you want to focus on crops that are going to help bring in money. Cotton is very desirable. However, in the United States, cotton itself is very, very expensive. And it's not because it's hard to grow, it's because it's hard to harvest because of the seeds that are stuck inside the fibers and are very hard to go ahead and take out. So cotton is not really viewed as a cash crop at this time until Eli Whitney, who's from Connecticut, comes down into the South, and he is a carpenter who is also kind of a very smart man and likes to create inventions. And what he creates at this time is the cotton gin. And basically what it is a bunch of combs attached to a lever. And what you do is you take the cotton that has been harvested, place it down, and then you crank it. And as it cranks, the cotton gets caught in these combs, which pull it through, and then it kind of weaves out the seeds. And the seeds just basically separate. And as they separate, the seeds fall to the bottom, and then the cotton just goes through where there are no seeds there. Now, this creates such a fast production of harvesting the cotton from fiber to seed that it explodes in the South, which means that the South is going to be focusing on cotton right now. So here I'm going to be showing you a video that explains the cotton gin in a little bit more detail.
They've been making cloth out of cotton in India for several thousand years now. But the kind of cotton that grew in this country, except right along the Atlantic coast, was short staple cotton. With short staple cotton, the seeds were embedded and were sticky. And pulling the seeds out of the cotton was very, very difficult. I mean, for instance, one man could pick about 50 pounds of cotton in the field. It would then take him 3 weeks to pull the seeds out of the cotton. And Eli Whitney, who was a New Englander from Connecticut, visited the South. And so he was one of these Yankee tinkerers, and he came up with this device that is so simple any competent carpenter could make one in half a day, which had combs that would pull the cotton, and then they would go through other combs, leaving the seeds behind. And the seeds would go into one box, and the cotton would go into another. And with the cotton gin, one man could gin as much cotton in one day as previously it had taken him 3 weeks. In other words, enormous saving in labor, and thus tremendous drop in the price of cotton to produce. So you could sell it for less and still make a handsome profit. And it turned out that the American South was the best place in the world to grow cotton once the cotton gin was invented. The growth in the cotton industry was just phenomenal in the antebellum period. I mean, we went from like 40,000 pounds in 1800 to 2 billion pounds in 1860. And it became known as King Cotton. Slavery had been in decline, and a lot of the plantation owners at the end of the 18th century were either freeing their slaves or they were freeing them in their will. When the cotton gin came along, cotton became so profitable that it revived slavery. And even the parts of the South that were too far north to grow cotton, like Virginia and Maryland, began selling slaves south to the new cotton plantations. And the price of a field hand, which had been around $300 in 1800, was up as much as $6,000 by 1860. In other words, slaves became so valuable as a commodity that the idea of freeing them, getting rid of this awful system of forced labor, just disappeared, just became politically impossible. And it was a terrible tragedy. I mean, cotton made the South, and it also destroyed the South.
So as the speaker is talking, he's kind of explaining how the cotton gin solidifies slavery in the South. And we're starting to see that this agricultural economy is being supported by slavery, which is why it was prolonged in the United States. So let's go ahead and let's view the next document inside here, which is going to be, just going back down. It's going to be regional differences. So just to kind of explain what's going on, regional means a particular area of a country or state. So for example, here we're talking about the North versus the South. So the South, as I mentioned before, is a large agricultural society. And the reason why it is largely agricultural is because of the long growing seasons, the climate that's available in the South. Us living in Texas, we can definitely understand this with these long, nice warm weather. It is almost all year round, which is very, very helpful for growing things like cotton, tobacco, or other types of cash crops. Now, the North, on the other hand, doesn't have long growing seasons, nor do they have the suitable soil to do so. The North is kind of very rocky, lots of mountains, whereas the South is very flat and very suitable for growing and creating large plantations. The North, because the weather drops so dramatically in the winter time, the ground becomes hard as like diamonds, just very, very rough, and you can't do anything. We also start to see that the North has a lot of navigable rivers that actually come into the continent and then come out into the ocean, which is going to be very helpful for them and really starts this huge industry and the Industrial Revolution. And what we start to see is this huge transition of where the North started out as large colonies of Puritans. It starts to go ahead and shift into this industrial cities like New York, Newark, Hartford, Boston, and we see that the religion aspect starts to kind of dwindle down, and now it's becoming this huge area of finance and just factories all over. Now, because of this industrial revolution, the North doesn't need slaves. They have machines that kind of do everything for them, and they just need a few people that know how to work those machines. The South, on the other hand, doesn't have machines. They have people that harvest by hand, and that's where, you know, slavery is basically, the plantation system is based off of that. Now, the South also has some different aspects as well. They have a different culture, whereas the North is very, very different because of what they value and what they need. Now, the South's culture is going to be a little bit more religious because of the fact that there are going to be less people in the South, and they tend to go ahead and be more with religion and church. So they're going to be a lot more conservative, where the North is going to be more liberal. Because the North needs to protect their factories, because that's what's driving them, they ask the government to put in these tariffs, or a tax, where it takes a price of a product that doesn't come from the United States, for example, Europe, it will drive that price up. So people in America, instead of buying the European brand, they're going to buy the American brand, basically protecting those factories. The South really does not want to purchase from the North because it can just be expensive for them. The North can choose those prices and they want to have options. And so they're not really happy with this. And they want to see, the tariff being taken away, because it's also hurting them as well, because Europe is not going to want to purchase from them. So let me just go ahead and show you a quick video that's going to just talk about the differences between the North and the South.
One of the biggest reasons leading to the American War between the states was a huge difference in culture and way of life between North and South. In the North, particularly New England, manufacturing and industry provided the main source of income and jobs.
Sorry about that. I'm going to replay that.
One of the biggest reasons leading to the American War between the states was a huge difference in culture and way of life between North and South. In the North, particularly New England, manufacturing and industry provided the main source of income and jobs, and most people lived in cities. In the South, however, most people still lived in rural settings and farmed for a living. Northerners had also become much more secular in their outlook on life and readily accepted even religions which questioned the authority of the Bible and Orthodox Christianity. Southerners, however, continued to have a deep love and abiding respect for the Word of God. Northern cities were crowded with people from every country of Europe and even beyond, while the southern states continued to be made up almost entirely of people from the British Isles, with a large majority of them originating from Ireland and Scotland. These people in the South had a much stronger tradition of ties to the land and to family clans. Northern city dwellers tended to believe in bigger, stronger civil government, while most Southerners felt that there should be less government in their day-to-day lives.
All right, so as she kind of explains those cultural, the geography, and the regional differences. So what happens here, and what you need to understand, is because of these differences between the two regions, we begin to see a difference in opinion. And this is then taken into Congress because each side wants different things, and it creates tension. And that tension obviously grows as more land or more territory gets adopted into the states. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take a look at our next one, which is the plantation system. So the plantation system has been hit quite a bit here, but the whole point of the plantation system is going to be large amounts of farms, large amount of acres that are going to be used to create cash crops. And again, how does this plantation system exist and how does it run? It's based off of slave labor. And this is kind of when we're looking at like the cotton industry blowing up, and it is giving the ability to go ahead and harvest all that cotton and being able to sell it for a decent price and be able to make lots of money off of that. And that's why the South is based off that plantation system. And a lot of it has to do with climate and geography available. So just take a moment and watch this video that's going to explain the plantation system and comparing it with a subsistence farming, which is going to be farming for yourself. Okay. That up here for you.
Concepts use basic concept mapping to help students understand an overarching big idea. Today we'll explore subsistence farming versus the plantation system. A subsistence farm is a small farm where the person grows enough food to meet their needs. In colonial South Carolina, most small farmers lived in the back country, and most did not own very many, if any, slaves. The plantation system is a large agricultural system where slaves were used for all aspects of labor and where a unique set of rules govern all aspects of life. Most southern states had their own set of slave codes that told slaves what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. South Carolina slave codes can be traced back to the slave codes that many settlers brought with them from Barbados. Most plantations produced cash crops such as tobacco, rice, sugarcane, indigo, and later on cotton. In colonial South Carolina, most plantations were located in the Low Country and produced rice and indigo.
So you can see the difference between subsistence farming and plantation system. So just make sure you go through and read that and answer the questions on the guided sheet. So going back, we're going to view the next document, which is going to be protective tariffs. And we kind of talked about that already, but I'm just going to go ahead and just talk about it very quickly. So protective tariffs are basically what it sounds. They protect something. And at this point, it's going to go ahead and protect the North, the industry. And what we start to see is the South being very upset with this. And to kind of get a look at this, take a look at the the graphic on the bottom, where you're taking a look at the United States. American-made cloths are going to be $4. However, it's going to be the same price in Britain. So now what happens is if it's the same price, people have an option to choose between either one. To protect American factories, America will go ahead and put a tax on the British goods. They are allowed to be sold in the United States. However, if you're going to go to the store, you're going to choose the cheaper amount versus the more expensive amount. And that's really what's allowing people in the South and people in the North to go ahead and purchase American-made products. So that's what protective tariffs are. Now, what this does is it creates a rift inside of Congress because the South wants these tariffs to go, and they actually want to go ahead and strengthen state rights. However, the North, being a large industry, wants the government to protect them, to make sure that their industries and their factories will continue to grow. So the government steps in and protects them, and the South doesn't want that. So to go ahead and see and understand this a little better, I'm going to go ahead and share with you a video that talks about protective tariffs. Let me bring that up.
There were many disagreements between the North and the South. It was becoming clear that the nation was divided both economically and politically. One of the main economic issues was a tariff or tax charged on all imported European goods. This made European goods much more expensive than those made in the United States. Congress passed the tariff to encourage the South to buy goods from the North and not from Europe. This made the South economically dependent on the North because they bought their manufactured goods from them. Senator John Calhoun was from the South, and he argued that Congress did not have the right to use a tariff to protect the manufacturing industry of the North at the cost of the agricultural sector of the South.
So as you can see here, this creates a huge rift between the North and the South where they don't like each other because they feel one is being more favored than the other. And you could just imagine how that is even in your own life. If maybe there seems to be something that's happening for someone else other than you, and that kind of gets you upset. So that's just basically how the tariff leads to the causes of the Civil War. Let's go ahead and let's move on and take a look at Henry Clay. So who is he and why is he important? So Henry Clay is a senator at the time who does want to become president, but unfortunately he does not. But what he does do is he goes ahead and prolongs the peace within inside the United States and kind of making it to a point where the Civil War doesn't happen earlier on, which really almost did happen, specifically with new territories coming into the United States. And everyone's trying to figure out, are they slave states? Are they not slave states? Because now if there are more slave states than non-slave states, or more non-slave states than slave states, there's going to be a imbalance in Congress, which means one side will be more powerful than the other, and that's going to cause a rift and possibly splitting up the country. So Henry Clay is known as the Great Compromiser because he comes up with all these great compromises to go ahead and stop the Civil War from happening sooner. Things like the Missouri Compromise, the Great Compromise. So let me just show you a quick video that's going to talk about who Henry Clay is and just kind of why he's important to American history.
Henry Clay, as a border state person and person who wanted to be president himself, played a major role in trying to keep the country together. Sharp tongue, strong mind. Henry Clay was probably the greatest actor among the prominent members of the House and Senate in the 1830s, 40s, and early 50s.
Henry Clay was a remarkable statesman, someone that the country can understandably be proud of, but we need to remember that Henry Clay was also a slaveholder, and he was an apologist for slavery.
So as you can see, Henry Clay really is this person that helps the United States stay together. But unfortunately, the differences between the North and the South are just become too great that eventually the South feels like they need to leave. And that's what leads to the Civil War. So let's go ahead and let's go back and let's view the last few documents of today. The Missouri Compromise, which is going to be focusing on the states that are coming in from the Louisiana Purchase. So if you remember from 1803, we learned that the United States purchased land from France from Napoleon. And from there, these territories started to go ahead and increase in population. And as they increased in population, they were actually able to apply for statehood. And as they applied for statehood, it became a decision. What are they going to be? Is slavery going to be allowed, or is it not going to be allowed? Because now we're starting to see the North is not really for slavery, and the abolitionists are pushing for slavery to be abolished. Where the South, if you remember, slavery has been solidified because of the cotton gin and the need for slaves to go ahead and produce these large amounts of cotton, like 2 billion, tons worth of cotton to sell to the world. So as we start to see the territories start to get adopted, and it's causing issues, and the issues are really some states want to come in as slave states and others do not, because the North is afraid of losing power or being overtaken in power in Congress. They want states to be let in even. So basically, for every slave state that comes into the United States, a free state has to follow, and vice versa. For every free state that comes in, a slave state comes in. So what we're seeing is we're not going to have this, but we're going to have this as it moves up. Henry Clay comes up with this in the 1820s, and it works. It holds off the Civil War from happening much earlier. So let's go ahead and let's watch a quick video that's going to explain this a little bit better.
To understand what the Missouri Compromise is and why it's so significant in American history, we have to take it back about 200 years. Now, let me set the stage for you. The year is 1820. The U.S. is a young nation with 22 states, 11 free states in the north and 11 slave states in the south. But this balance is called into question when Missouri, a piece of land acquired from Louisiana Purchase, wanted to be admitted into the Union as a slave state. Slavery was a highly contentious issue in the U.S. at this point. Some were pushing for the total abolition of slavery, while others looked to expand it. This issue pinned families and states against each other, creating a powder keg just waiting to explode. With tensions already high, the idea of Missouri entering as a slave state prompted heated debate in Congress and throughout the nation too. Not just about Missouri, of course, but also how slavery factored into all future states and the future of the nation. Many argued over whether Congress even had the right to spread or limit slavery in the United States at all. While Northerners argued Congress should be allowed to prohibit slavery, Southerners insisted on popular sovereignty, the idea that it should be up to the states to determine this for themselves. These sentiments sound familiar? The biggest sticking point of the debate was political power. You see, Missouri's entrance as a slave state would throw off the balance of power in Congress. So to keep things even, Congress hashed out a separate solution, a compromise of sorts. In exchange for Missouri's admission as a slave state, the Northern Territory of Maine would be admitted as a free state. This ensured equal representation between the North and the South. A second part of the compromise banned slavery throughout the remaining Louisiana Purchase territory north of latitude line 3630. But while the Missouri Compromise limited the spread of slavery, it did nothing to abolish slavery in states that already had it. So while in some ways it staved off a civil war, it was only because it just maintained the status quo. The admission of Missouri as a slave state only fanned the flames of the national debate over slavery, a fierce disagreement that wouldn't be resolved until the end of the Civil War.
So as you can see, this gentleman really explains the Missouri Compromise and how it kind of holds off this huge war from starting. But again, more states are going to come in. Texas comes in much later, and they want to come in as a slave state, and that really off ticks it. And then the Mexican-American War, all that new land comes in, and it just really puts the whole United States in a huge uproar. And that's kind of what we're going to see. So let's go ahead and let's finish off with our last document, which is going to be the Compromise of 1850, which is exactly what we're talking about, the U.S.-Mexican War. So the United States, if you remember, they gain all this territory after defeating Mexico and completing their manifest destiny. But now slavery is a hot topic in Congress. It's a hot topic in the United States. And now we're trying to figure out with the Missouri Compromise, with that line going all the way across, it's going to give more slave states than it is going to give more free states. And that really just upsets a lot of senators, and they want things to be different. It's going to be very hard to go ahead and decide who's going to be slave and who's not going to be slave. The southern states want this decision to be done by the states, which is like the Kansas-Nebraska Act, where people should decide whether they are slave, allowing slavery or not allowing slavery. Whereas, you know, the North, they want it to be decided by the government, because again, they want more government control, and the South wants more state control. So what we start to see is the compromise does this. Henry Clay comes up with another way to go ahead and pause on the Civil War, but not really that long. About 10 years, in about 10 years, it really starts to explode off. So California is going to be admitted as a free state. However, we're going to see that other areas are going to be admitted as slave states. And it's going to go ahead and just create this new area where slavery is going to be abolished and where it's not going to be abolished. So I'm going to show you a quick video that's going to explain the Compromise of 1850 and how it basically holds off the United States from just falling apart.
My name is Matthew Pinsker. I'm a historian, and here are a few things you need to know to sound smart about the Compromise of 1850. In 1850, things are way more complicated than before because it's the aftermath of the Mexican War, with the acquisition of territory in the West, an era of great sectional strife. This is right after the gold rush in California of 1849. There's an awful lot of pressure over what to do about admitting a state in the West that doesn't have a history of slavery and might alter the sectional balance between slave and free states in the U.S. Senate. And in January of 1850, a senator named Henry Clay, who's famous as a compromiser in American history, he offered a package of proposals to try to adjust the sectional debate between the country over this issue. And the debate in the Senate was fierce and intense, some of the most dramatic scenes in American history. And they turned over the architecture, the engineering of this compromise package to Stephen Douglas, a younger senator from Illinois, a Democrat. And Douglas decided that the only way to get enough support for all of the different elements of the compromise was to break it apart and treat it separately. When it achieved final form as a series of separate bills in the fall of 1860, there were only 5 bills. One was about the admission of California as a state, a free state. One was about the organization of the Southwest territories, New Mexico and Utah, without regard to slavery. One was about the adjustment of the border with Texas and New Mexico. One was about the elimination of the slave trade in the District of Columbia. And the 5th and final bill, and most important for Southerners, a tougher federal fugitive slave law. Afterwards, enough people were relieved that they felt like they had achieved a kind of compromise, but most historians realized it was a shaky one at best. And even though it appeared for a couple of years that it would succeed, very quickly the fabric of this so-called compromise of 1850 fell apart.
Young people in large numbers.
Okay, so as you can see, what the Compromise of 1850 does, it allows for stability, but as he mentioned, it doesn't really last long. Please make sure that you're familiar with the 5 parts of the Compromise of 1850, because you are going to be responsible for that. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly bring you back. Now, I want to thank you so much for sticking with me. I know this is not exactly really interesting stuff, but when you think about it, how it leads to the Civil War, it really shows what's happening. So I want to leave you with some food for thought and a processing. I want you to pick one of these documents and create an acrostic poem that basically talks about the reason why the early causes of the Civil War. So you can choose any of these, and I will go ahead and put it up on Canvas for you to go and select, and you're just going to be pulling from different areas and kind of how it works. Now, you just need to be able to take 1 or 2 words. For example, you can take the word tariff and be focusing on tariffs. If you wish, you can take the word compromise and work on compromise. You can take the word plantation. You don't need to use the full word plantation system. Just make sure that whichever word you look at, it's going to focus on that particular cause for Civil War to come about. I'm going to give you just an example of one of what an acrostic poem is. So an acrostic poem is a word that's going to be written down vertically. I'm just going to go ahead and just share my screen with you so you can kind of see it. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you. For example, we'll go ahead and we'll take the word shark. So you write it down vertically, and then from here, I will go ahead and describe what sharks are. And here I would write down sharp teeth. Okay, to go ahead and describe the shark. H, I could say something like hard, tough skin for protection. Okay, and let's say, for example, I can't find something. I can go ahead and I can put the word here in the front. So I could say something like tail fins, okay, to help them move. So this is perfectly fine. It doesn't need to fall all the way down. You just need to make sure that it kind of lines up in a way where obviously the A is capitalized, so it reads the word shark coming down. And I hope that helps you a little bit to understand what an acrostic poem is. It will give you an opportunity to go ahead and solidify the information. I will say that you can use one specifically where you could talk about all of it. And I would just use the word Civil War. That will be the only one where you can actually talk about any or all of these documents that we went over. So you can go ahead and use the word Civil War. I will go ahead and create a slide for you to go ahead and work off Canvas. But other than that, I want to thank you so much for sticking along. And I hope these videos help make it easier for you to understand the material. You guys have a great day, and I will see you soon.